Welcome to The Truth in This Art, your source for conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today I'm excited to be in conversation with my next guest. Born and raised in Connecticut, childhood trips to New York City exposed him to the creative potential of reinventing public spaces through art and design. Inspired by mid-century American cartoons and skate culture, he's become known for his vibrant murals and studio work, which combines vivid explosions of color with a surrealist pop art perspective. His work features gleefully twisted characters that create an unsettling yet captivating world. Please welcome Greg Mike. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for coming on. And I'm a little jealous of the hat. We'll have to talk about this afterwards. But, before we get into sort of the larger topics of the conversation, and we spoke a little bit briefly before hitting the record button, I want to invite you to introduce yourself, if you will. I find often when a guest for podcasts, not always mine, but guests for like podcasts and interviews, they hit maybe one or two things. And inevitably something is missing, something that really peers into the soul of who the person is. So I want to give you the space to introduce yourself in your own words.
Of course. Well, my name is Greg Mike, artist, designer, based in Atlanta, Georgia, currently painting all over the world. Just got back from Amsterdam, actually. We can jump into that a little bit later. But yeah, grew up my entire life painting and doing art since a very young age. My family kind of introduced me to the arts very early on, with theater and music and painting and drawing, and just something I fell in love with. I've always been into the arts and street art my entire life, as long as I can remember. At an early age, I was, painting the more traditional stuff, just landscapes and taking art classes. And as I got a little bit older, I got into snowboarding, and I was living up north in Connecticut at the time. And that kind of led me into skateboarding in the summer. And through skateboarding, I learned about graffiti and started painting on the streets. And, that led me to street art, and went to school, Florida State, for design and art. And I've been in Atlanta close to 20 years now, which is crazy. Wow. Never thought I would be in the city. I was never part of my roadmap, so it was kind of interesting to end up here, but have had my gallery and agency that I started 15 years ago, ABV, here in Atlanta. But it's kind of just all happened organically over the years. As I started traveling and painting all over the world, I felt like there needed to be something like this in Atlanta. So it's been cool that I've kind of integrated that into my practice, and, my work is having a space like this to bring artists here. Just been painting all over the globe and showing work and painting murals. And here we are today.
I like that. You're giving it all away. I'm going to have to be tapping back into some of my questions. But, let's go back a little bit, because I think it's always one of those things that stick out for us. When you think about those early experiences, especially with this sort of the fact that you have worked globally, you have work everywhere, as you were touching on, is there a really like early experience perhaps with street art, or as you touched on, even, some of the other arts, theater and so on, that really stuck out, that left a mark for you when you think back on, this is where this began for me, this particular experience. I used to call it the crime alley question. If you're into Batman lore, what was your crime alley for you when it comes to art?
Yeah, I think growing up, I was so influenced by like just the cartoons that I would watch. I remember, I think at an early age, that really inspired me, and you can see it now. It's still like very apparent in my work, the clean lines, the bold colors, bold, bright colors, like the action, the energy that you see in cartoons. I think as a kid growing up, I would just sit in front of the TV and fall in love with just watching, all the old school retro Disney stuff. And I loved how those characters moved and were animated and all drawn by hand at the time. I think really just that all mixed, like kind of just like really got me hooked. And then it just, the more I got into it and the deeper that I dove and went down the rabbit hole, like the more I got addicted to just art and public art and street art and getting things outside of your typical studio.
I dig it. I'm a big cartoon fan as well. So you start mentioning cartoons, I'm waiting for one. I'm waiting for you to like, yeah. So when I was watching like Animaniacs back in the day, it's like, oh.
Dude, I watched it all, man. Everything from Animaniacs to The Simpsons to I mean, Beavis and Butthead to all the, Disney stuff to Looney Tunes. I mean, you name it, like all that stuff I was just in love with. Still am.
Yeah, there's we have these inflection points. There's a version where I'm kind of filtering off that I could have been a cartoonist. Like that was an area I was into. And I did illustration like before getting into podcasting as sort of my creative outlet. And I've been doing this, nearly 16 years. Art, comics, and maybe to a degree cartoons was the direction I wanted to go into. And being into a lot of different things like early 90s Fox, you get that Saturday morning like hookup. It's like, okay, we got X-Men, great. We got Spider-Man, we got Silver Surfer, all of that stuff. Or even going back, and I'm going to really age myself, I used to con my dad to record all of the old like cartoons, like the defunct sort of Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe. I'm like, yo, can you put this on a VHS? Because I'm choosing between school and missing my cartoons.
Yeah, I remember just like running home from school and just like plopping in front of the TV and just sitting there and just zoning out and getting lost. It's cool because I have a kid now and he's, I have 2 kids, but my son is like super into cartoons and everything. So it's like, it's cool to kind of like see myself, in him and just like how lost he gets in those worlds. I think like, especially our era, it was like, we didn't have phones and internets and tablets and, so it's like, that's all we had, which was like kind of like a view into this outside imaginative world, right? Like, that it probably answered a lot of questions or sparked a lot of things that were going on in our heads as kids. So I think that helped like spur the idea of like imagination.
Yeah.
Right? Because for me, it was just like the TV and the woods because I was like living up north and it was like, that's all I had. It was like going out into the woods and like building forts and like sitting in front of the TV and just like, and maybe watching MTV and like figuring out how to record like crisscross video or something on there. But that was about it,
Before I move into this next question, back in September, because I'm crossing a lot of different areas of creativity and I think trying to democratize it, right? And it's not just I'm talking to fine artists, I'm talking to street, I'm talking to a litany of different people that pique my interest. And during this sort of journey of doing more than 800 interviews at this point, I got connected with a bunch of cartoonists and artists in Columbus, Ohio. And we're having this like intellectual panel on sort of the like almost activism component to arts and to cartoons and trying to talk really intellectual about like, so in Family Guy, when this happened, and I'm like, it's come full circle. It's like I'm doing the academic thing, but I'm talking about cartoons in the discourse. So that's really cool.
Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of times, like, I mean, illustration and cartoons are like an easy way for people to understand and relate to things. I mean, I see that with my work too. I mean, I try to keep my work, pretty colorful and happy and positive, but it's like, it relates to kids at a super young age. And then like the nostalgic element can relate to, people that are, 30, 40, even older that, brings them back to like a time and place of like happiness. But it's like for that, I mean, that's art in general, but I definitely think with like cartoons and illustrations, it definitely makes it easy and consumable for folks.
So for folks who are undipped, could you describe like sort of your work, like the key characteristics in it? Like obviously colorful, that's a piece of it. But what is essential or that essential piece to your style? Like what separates maybe, I guess, what is that signature for a Greg Mike piece?
Yeah, I definitely think, my characters and my color, like I have like a running character called Larry Loudmouth that's like in a lot of my work, which is just like usually square, chip tooth mouth that says phrases that are either submitted by, people in our community or friends or family or fans or collectors. And it's became more of like a voice that's larger than mine, which is cool. It's like this character that's kind of like animated by, the voice and thoughts and of people larger than just my head and my brain. Right. But yeah, definitely with my work, it's these reoccurring characters. It's a touch of nostalgia. It's the loud, bold, bright, colorful. It's like, a lot of the clean line work. I think a lot of people know that. The design aspect of my work, I went to school for graphic design and studio art as well. So I have a little bit of balance on both sides of like the traditional like studio fine art drawing side, but then also, the design aspect where I'm very big into like balance and color theory and color stories and then, just mixing and collaging all that stuff together. I feel like it's really, for me with my work in general, it's like I want to bring people to a place of like, remembering when times are, easy and fun and enjoyable as a kid. I think there's a lot of stress nowadays with everything that's going on in the world. And like, if you can make people have, happy memories of their youth, I think that's successful. And then bring some positivity into, neighborhoods or communities when you're painting these large, bright, colorful murals. I think that's a win.
Dope. So in that the start off portion, the ideation, like how do you start when you want to work on a piece, you want to work on a mural, that this is a project that you're going to engage in, you're going to put some time towards, like where does the process start? And I'm saying that selfishly, right? Because I'm in this stage, I'm looking for what I'm doing for my next season. And I'm like, all right, am I too far ahead? Things could change, but because I steal from you artist types, right? I steal from y'all, I let y'all say y'all thing. And I'm like, all right, so Greg said this.
Yeah.
So what is where do you start? How do you start?
A lot of the times, it really is, project specific, depending, for example, like if I'm going to Cincinnati and painting a mural, for example, I painted up there for Blank 2 years ago. They'll usually send me a wall, and then the wall I'll usually go and do some research on the community and the area and the neighborhood. And I try to do my, some work, some history work, and figure out, how I could create a piece that resonates with the community that, also ties back, from a history standpoint, whether that's like, for example, pulling nostalgic characters that might have a nod to something that the city's known for. Things like that. But then on the other side, like someone might send me a picture of a wall. For example, when I painted in the Swiss Alps for Vision Art Festival, they sent me a picture of the wall. And immediately when I saw the architecture of the building, I saw faces on the building and characters on the building made up of the windows on the wall. So like, it really depends on what the project is and what I'm painting and where the piece is going to live. Like something that's in the studio might be a little bit more personal that I know is a canvas. That's like, I'm kind of attacking it more like a journal where it's like, okay, now I'm just getting thoughts and feelings out. Yeah. But it really depends on the audience that's interacting with it, the location of the piece, the architecture of whatever the substrate is that I'm painting. And then that all mixed with just like how I'm feeling at the time. A lot of my work is just like me trying to portray things that I can't communicate with words. This piece that I just did in Amsterdam at Strat Museum out there, like it was just all based on like feelings and thoughts that I couldn't convey via words. So a lot of my work is kind of like that emotion of like trying to get out what's inside my head and my body and my brain that I can't speak. That's why you see a lot of these characters that are like yelling and loud and bold and energetic. It's like it's really I'm trying to convey that feeling inside, and that could be like a lot of that stuff could be feelings that I'm dealing with current events that are going on within the United States, right, or whatever in our area or just in my life. So it's like trying to take that and put all that energy into art, and usually it's happy and positive, but most of the time it's loud and energetic, and there might be a little bit of like some sinister element in it too that I don't think I'll ever get rid of. That's just like been in me since the old like painting on the street days, and
to keep a little edge. Just a little edge, just a little edge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's important. I think it has to have a feeling element. There's always a degree of like personal touch to it. When I do these, and really I'm sitting here, I'm doing an interview, I'm trying to, if we're using let's say basketball as a reference point, right? I'm just trying to be Trae Young. I made a real Atlanta right there for you specifically. Yeah, exactly. You just try to hand the ball off, and but I think that personal touch in it, that's what makes it real. That's what separates it. Like anyone can interview you, but my approach is going to be sort of different. I'm trying to get to how the thinking goes into the person's work. And I think that's what you articulated there. It's very much, it's coming from you. It's, an extraction. And I think a lot of times when we're holding on to these things, especially when we're doing something creative, it's just like, now you didn't really give your full there. You could have gave more. What do you really have to say? What are you really feeling about this particular thing, or what's going on in your mind, at that moment? And, you know, is there like a project, let's say recently you were touching on Amsterdam, is there a project that sticks out, specific? Could you set the stage for us, like that was very memorable for you?
Yeah, I think like from just a location standpoint, like from something that one of those like pinch me moments kind of was when I painted in the Swiss Alps in Amsterdam, sorry, in Switzerland. Um, that I think was one of those moments where I was like I had like a kind of a little epiphany, just like thinking like, wow, this is wild that art and painting and sticking with something for so many years is now allowing me to travel all over the globe. Because I was just, I painted this huge wall out there, and then I had a day off, and I got to go up to the top of the Swiss Alps mountains, and I just looked down at the village that I had painted my mural in, and it just kind of all hit me, and it just, I'm a strong believer of just like, anything you put your time and energy into, hard work, eventually you're going to see success in that. It's just hours. You could do anything you want to do in the world. You just got to put in the time and the energy, and you're going to reap the benefits of it. But I think at that moment, that was one of those, like when it all hit. And even when I was just out in Amsterdam, I had one of those moments because it's probably the largest street art museum in the world, if not. And just thinking like, it's crazy because I was a kid who got denied to art school, and now I'm painting in a museum, right? So it's like, it's stuff like that that really just makes me feel humble, blessed, excited. I mean, there's so many different words and feelings when you have those moments, but I'm a believer in hard work. Anybody can do anything if they put in the work and the hours.
Yeah. You get that's a really good sentiment too. I'll say this before I move to this next question. I had the opportunity in the last year to try out teaching at an art school, right? And it was a art school like focused on like high schoolers, and I was one of those kids that didn't get in when I was their age. So being able to come back as a teacher, I was like, and it was one of those sort of full circle moments. And like you were touching on, that edge is always there. The pettiness is
Yeah.
always there for me. It's like, yeah, I'm back. You're gonna see me one way or the other.
Yeah, no, I definitely carry that stuff with me, and like I keep it as kind of like fuel for my fire, right? I mean, I saved like a rejection letter. I mean, I ended up going to school for art,
Sure.
but it wasn't a fully art school. I'm not going to mention the name, but there was a school that was like my dream art school, right? And I didn't get in there, and I saved the rejection letter, and I ended up drawing like a middle finger on the rejection letter that I still have to this day. I've never really posted or shown it, maybe a few close friends, but I think like you kind of need those moments sometimes in life that can help you push through, that you kind of, when you're feeling a certain way, you dig into that core memory, and that really is like the gasoline in your tank that helps you, go full steam ahead and work longer hours and push harder and really just like rise above, where you're typically at the moment.
Yeah, sometimes I keep those instances. Like I was joking before we got started that I flub my intros, right? So when I go back through the editing, I'm like, look, I know how to talk. Why am I botching this so much? But it's one of those reminders that, and I think I get something from this, that this is the part that's important, right? The conversation that we're having, me doing this flowery intro, it's going to be there in post, but the conversation is the important piece. And I think through really thinking about it and really thinking about like, am I messing this up? Am I bad at this? And really interrogating that, it helped me understand what was important about the conversation. And it's not necessarily how it's framed, it's the actual conversation.
Yep, for sure. And I think everybody has those moments of doubt. I know. I mean, even as myself as an artist, and I think the artistic process is one of those too, where it's like halfway through, you're always doubting your stuff. I know I talk to a lot of artists that are like, I hate 90% of my work until it gets to about the 90% mark. And then I'm like, oh God, okay, this is coming together. It's looking good. All right. And then at the end, you're happy with it. But I know a lot of artists I talk to that deal with that. That's like that, like self, reflection. You feel like your world's falling apart.
Yeah.
And you're the worst artist in the world. And then when you see the final product, you're like, okay,
I survived it.
yeah. Yeah.
I remember this interview recently. I saw maybe a clip where I think it was talking about writers, and it's just like, oh yeah, you're 90% done. Cool. You're at that 50% point. That's great. You got 50% of the work done because the
Yeah.
editing and all of that stuff that goes into it. So I want to get your take as I see, obviously the habit you're talking about a little bit earlier, ABV gallery agency. So let's talk a bit about the creative direction in your work there, and let's also talk about the outer space project. Let's get into it. Like, give me sort of like how you approach sort of creative direction, and I have a second point about outer space, but at least want to like talk about the ABV portion first.
Yeah. So I started painting, outside of Atlanta, I think around 2009. And I would like go on these creative highs basically, because I go to these bigger cities, I'd paint these big walls, I'd meet all these awesome artists, galleries, curators, and then I'd come back to this city and I just kind of feel like I'd lose that energy, because at the time, like Atlanta didn't have, an artist gallery like ABV is today. I mean, now there's multiples, but that was, showing street art and contemporary art and pop surrealism and all this stuff that I was into. So that was like what inspired me to create ABV was, just the having a space that I could bring in artists that I was meeting from all over the world to Atlanta, because there's a lot of people that don't get the chance to travel the world and see all this art. So I wanted to create a space here that could do that and, bring talent to our city. But then also there were so many awesome, incredible artists I was meeting locally that, we were hosting like our drawing nights where we just bring a bunch of artists together and draw and drink beers. And like all these things were just like little ideas and thoughts that now have evolved into like the mural festival, like Outer Space Project, or massive drink and doodle events, which we've been doing for 15 years, where we're bringing in like 80 artists at a time with DJs, and all the artwork goes up for auction and all the artists draw live. And you have people that are coming in that are prepping their canvases and bringing little easels in. And, they're taking this serious, where it was when we started it was just, 5 friends hanging around drinking beers, doing little doodles and tags on notebook paper, right? So it's cool because everything that's happened has just been like an organic growth that started with just like an idea, like me traveling and wanting to bring artists to Atlanta, but now has grown into this like massive production, whether that's like our art shows in the gallery or these events that we're producing, like the Mural Festival or gallery shows. 4 years ago, I walked into the building I'm in now. I'm actually in the back of my private studio here, which is a 8,500 square foot church. I've been wanting to buy a building because I was renting for 15 years. And I'm like, I'm probably going to hopefully put in another 30 to 40 years, right? So it's like, I want to buy a building that we can design and build out. I came across this church that they had up for sale, and it was a 4-year process. We gutted the whole thing all the way down to the studs in the dirt, and all new drywall, electrical, lighting, everything. And just built basically like a creative dream space. And yeah, that's where I'm sitting now in my back studio. But here we have a 5,000 square foot gallery. I did my solo show that just wrapped a few weeks ago here. We have a gift shop. We have a bar. We have conference rooms, our design agency. So everything's all in one room, one house, which is nice because, I have basically like 3 tiers. There's, or 3, I guess, avenues. It's basically like the Greg Mike art brand, which is all my murals and fine art stuff. And then there's our agency, which is all our commercial projects, which we're doing collaborations with brands, sports teams, you name it, developers, just figuring out how to integrate art into the commercial world. And then there's the gallery, which is just strictly fine art stuff. So it's cool because they all kind of play together, at certain times when the timing is right. Like if there's a project the agency's working on, you asked about the creative direction, I might step in and say, here's 10 ideas for this client or 10 artists that would be a good fit, or 10 concepts for an activation for a music festival, or here's the look and feel and direction that I'm seeing for this project. And then my team, which is incredible, they take that, they incorporate their own ideas, and then they run with it. And then they'll come back and say, here's what the client said. Here's some feedback. how do we interpret it? Where should we go with this? So, I'm able to step in. I can go upstairs. I was just up there, before this podcast, having a meeting with the whole team about Outer Space Project, our mural festival that we started. And it's good to just have it all under one roof where I can just bounce, throughout the day. I can be in my studio for a few hours, bounce upstairs, do some agency client stuff, go in the gallery and talk with Nate, our lead, curator there, talk about future shows and artists we're working with, and really just have it under one space. Outer Space Project, that's our mural festival that we started years ago. Yeah. And we've painted over 100 murals in Atlanta for that. And our next one's coming up the 18th through the 23rd. But we split our lineup, half local, half out of state, so that we support the locals. So it's always a big thing for us. And now with our building here, we're doing a lot bigger focus here in our neighborhood, invest more in this community. And yeah, it's like a week of programming of artist talks, art shows, secret walls, live art battles, murals all over the city, live art, DJs, music, action sports, skateboarding. So all that just like culminating into one week-long event. And then we do a big party at the end of the week called the Big Bang Block Party. So yeah, that's kind of like, that project is kind of my baby that we've created that really is just like, because we self-fund it all ourselves and just put everything we can back into the community to bring more art into the neighborhood and help Atlanta. So it's exciting. That's coming up just in a few weeks. So trying to get all the details done for it.
No, that is so dope, and thank you. You actually answered 2 other questions in that. So, like I said, sometimes you just let someone cook and have to do one of these. Let me stop myself. And also, Secret Walls. I heard, shout out to Terry. I interviewed him a few weeks back. And yeah, I have the ABV website up, and I'm looking at the visuals of the space. I was like, this is metal. This black church. This is so cool. And this is the first time. This will be a first, right? That I've said this on this podcast. There's a few people that know, kind of the picture you were describing, your rejection. It's only a few people that know about this. I wanted to do a podcast studio in an abandoned church. That we have a lot of like empty churches here. It's something about, I wanted to call it the Church of Pod, and really build that out and really make it a thing. Very similar purpose in that we have a lot of people who feel like it's inaccessible to do this creative stuff and like have, a podcast studio is part of the full mix, but being able to offer a space. I'm based in Baltimore, so being able to offer a space that folks can come there and it really serves the local, situation here. And, that's what I'm hearing throughout this conversation in your work, serving this Atlanta community and, artistic community. And this other piece that you touched on as well, sort of, being able to travel to all of these like other spaces and do work and make work and have that experience. And it's something about being able to travel to other cities as an artist, as a person who's an appreciator of art. And I'm saying it from my perspective, that it gives you new insights that you come back with, like, how can I apply that at home? How can I make that something that fits here?
Exactly. No, 100%. I mean, I get so inspired when I'm on the road and traveling. I mean, I don't know. I always like use this comparison, but like if you ever, notice when you're in your own city and you're driving, you kind of go on autopilot. You don't was that light red or was it green? I don't even remember because I was thinking about what I got to do in an hour.
Right.
Versus when you're in another city, like you're so alert because everything's so new. And I feel like your brain's kind of processing things like in a different fashion than when you're just like in your mundane, like, your schedule of what you do every day, right? When you're in these other cities, you're looking at things way different. You're looking at a street sign, you're looking at the architecture, and for me, traveling is like a huge part of just like getting inspired. I mean, that could be driving 30 minutes outside of the city, but just outside of my normal everyday route, right? To the office, to the studio, back home. But I love like you're saying, like going to these cities and seeing things and figuring out how you can implement it. And, for me, I think I've always been like an early adopter of just trends and whether that could be, music, right? I'm the guy that's like just always sending people Spotify tracks like, hey, have you heard this yet? Check this out, or on socials and, sending people things, look at this design or this lighting or this sculpture or how'd they do this? Or I'm constantly doing that. So I think I do find pride, like going to other cities, meeting artists and being like, have you seen this artist work yet? You got to check it out. Flying them to Atlanta or bringing them work into Atlanta and then showing them in the market. there's some joy in that for sure.
Absolutely. I feel the same way, and sort of just kind of being ahead of the curve a lot of times. And I get some of these interviews. It's like I'm the first time that they've been interviewed. Not the first time someone's asked about their work. I'm like, yeah. And for me, again, it's like there's some pettiness there. I'm a good guy, but also I have an edge, and I'm just like, yeah, I have exquisite taste.
Yeah.
Like, and that was one of the reasons why I was like, I got to talk to Greg Mike. That was sort of the thinking when this was coordinated. I was like, I got like one or two slots. And they were like, and so it was like, who's the main person you want to guess? Like, if we can get Greg, that would be great.
Well, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So, and we're definitely going to touch back on, Outer Space Project, again, in the shameless plugs, but I got sort of one more real question and then some rapid fire questions I want to rock with you. And this sort of last personal question is bridging, sort of having this intersection where, you talked about the commercial piece, you talked about the creative direction, you being an artist, having the curation, and, being in a spot where it's a lot of connective tissue, like locally with artists and externally with artists. If for someone that's doing that or aspires to do that, what piece of advice would you give them? There's a lot of moving parts, especially when you have your own your own project and your own work that you're doing as well. And it all is sort of like together. How do you keep it all organized? What advice would you share for someone who's like, I want to do this, but I want to do something similar to this?
Yeah. I wouldn't suggest anyone doing what I do because you don't have a life and it's a lot of stress and anxiety. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. But no, I think everything that I've done has been a slow growth. It's not like I just woke up one day and I was like, I want a team of 10 people, because that's where we're at now. Right. And it's like, it started with one intern, and that was years ago. And it just grew naturally as we grew. Because I didn't know, also, like, it was like everything that I was doing, I was learning as I was going along. Like, I didn't go to school for business, or, everything was trial and error, and, meeting the right people and networking and just keep going and keep pushing and not stopping and being relentless of, even though if you might have some failures, learning from that and taking L's and turning them into lessons and keep pushing, foot on the gas pedal no matter what. I think for me, a big thing was getting out and supporting other artists and networking and being involved in the community helped strengthen everything that we were doing. I know there's a ton of artists that are always like, what's the secret? How do you get booked on a festival? I mean, and I tell people, it's like, you got to get out there. You got to talk to people. I mean, it's a hard thing for a lot of artists, because a lot of artists are introverts and they just want to stay in their studio and paint. But there's also so many artists out there now where it's like very difficult, and you got to kind of break through the noise and be heard and make sure that you're at these events, whether that's like Art Basel, even if you're painting or showing at a fair or not. I think it's important to be there and to be seen and to talk to people and introduce your work to people. Yeah. We have tons of people that email through our gallery website, sending their work, but I think the strongest and most connections that we've made and shown in our gallery space are people that have shown up here, have had a face-to-face connection. Yeah. Even if that's pulling me out of a crowd and being like, hey, Greg, you got a second? Like, I'm going to look at your work, right? Like, and I'm going to be more attentive if I'm there in person versus an email that comes through with a, 300 word ChatGPT crafted artist statement and a link to your website. So, I mean, for us, it's like all the people, I would say most of them that have been here have been people that we've interacted like in real life. And it's been cool because a lot of the artists have like started as just, they'll do a drink and doodle event, and then they'll get invited to a gallery show, and then they'll get asked to do an agency project, and then they'll be featured as a muralist for our project. And it just continues to snowball in that fashion where it's like, you just got to get that one foot in the door at one of our smaller events and then just like build it up. Yeah. And, I mean, the other thing is social media is a great tool. It's an incredible tool, and the Explore page and all that stuff. Curators, I mean, including myself when I'm curating for our projects, I'm constantly looking at that stuff. Use it wisely. It's free marketing. if you're dope and you're doing great work and you're putting in the hours and your work is going to show for it, and the right people are going to see you with the internet nowadays. So it's like, there's no secret sauce that I can tell you that you can, mix in and your emails are going to explode with invitations to gallery shows. But I will tell you, if you put in the hours and the time into your work and master your craft, people will notice and find you.
Gems, jewels. Great. That was great. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's definitely, it's really sound advice. It's great advice. And I think that brings us to sort of the last chunk of the pod, the rapid fire portion. And as I tell people all the time, you don't want to overthink these. These questions are just, I said what I said, the sort of the answer. So here's I got 4 of them for you. Here's the first one. Since you mentioned your Spotify songs, this was already here. I didn't just write this, by the way. If your art style had a theme song, what would it be? I know.
That's hard because I play records and DJ, and I've been into music my entire life, so I'm already talking too much on this rapid fire. Maybe like Outkast, So Fresh and So Clean, from Atlanta. I paint very clean. And Strat just used that on one of my clips in the Amsterdam, and I was like, you can't use that. That's too cheeky. That's like Atlanta. And then I was like, I like painting really clean. I want it to be painted like it's printed. That's one of our mottos, like in my studio or when we paint murals and I have assistants working with me. I'm like, gotta make it look like, make sure your lines are super, super clean. So, you want it to be fresh, bright colors, and you want it to be clean and crispy. So I'll go with that one.
I like it. And I like the explanation for it because I was like, that is a little cheating. Then you explain. I was like, all right, you win. Yeah. You win on that one. Yeah. What is the wildest place that you've actually painted or even gotten inspired from a mural? Like something like a place that's just like, all right, I'm going to put one here. I don't know about this.
Yeah, I've already said Amsterdam and the Swiss Alps. So those are top 2, but I also have to throw in the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg. I grew up loving Salvador Dali. He was one of my biggest inspirations. I mean, you could probably see, obviously he's more realistic in terms of his work, but just like the whole like melting of everything and kind of like the surrealistic nature. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that one. If you haven't been there, go to St. Petersburg, check out the museum. It'll blow your mind.
I dig it. So you're in Atlanta. I've never been to Atlanta, so I'm curious. If I'm coming to Atlanta, where the players play, I had to throw that in there. What would be the food item that I have to get? Because when I was in Columbus for that cartoon festival I was talking about, I was like, yo, what's your food here? I never got an answer. I was there for 4 days. So I don't want to run into that in Atlanta. I don't want to talk to Keith Lee about his recommendations. I want to get your recommendation. What would be the food item I have to try if I'm visiting Atlanta?
I think a lot of people that come in town want to try the barbecue here. I think that's definitely like a go-to. Fox Brothers over here is pretty decent. Terry actually from Secret Walls, every time he comes in town, he's like, we got to go to Fox Bros. And it's usually at the end of a trip after a night of one of our events, and I send him on his way nice and full and feeling good. So I'll probably take you there. Yeah.
That's tight. That's tight. I've heard of Fox Brothers, so shout out to you. And here's the last one, and you'll probably remember that I may have queued this one up before we got started. What's your favorite color?
Blue, definitely blue, 100%.
Yeah, so I kept this background up.
I know. It matches all the blue things that are right behind my computer right now.
Yep.
Blue. I don't know why. I think just like the cool, calm, collective, it's very chill, but it's still got some punch. I think maybe I grew up, I spent some time by the ocean when I was younger, when I lived in South Florida. So maybe there's a little of that, like that teal element of the blue range.
Yeah.
It's kind of tranquil, right? But it can be punchy at times when you use it right.
Absolutely.
Blue skies are nice too,
Yeah.
It used to be red though. When I was a little kid, it was red. It went from red to blue. So I think that was like when I was into karate and I was a little more aggressive.
So you're creating a follow-up question that I'm not going to ask you because so blue was mine for a long time and it's now red. So that's why it's just
damn. Okay.
It's like
maybe I'll switch back. I don't know. But I've definitely have refined my palette. Like in the past few murals, I've been using like a lot of like just the CMYK colors, and a little bit of yellow too. I like the punchiness of yellow. And you got yellow right there on your screen too, blue and yellow.
See?
Right, there we go.
It's intentional. It's all fine. I hit the button as we. So that's kind of it for the rapid fire and the real questions. And in these final moments, there are two things that I would like to do. One, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with me. This has been great to connect. And two, I want to give you the opportunity to tell folks about the Outer Space Project, dates, social media, website, all of those things. Basically, it's a shameless plug portion. The floor is yours.
Well, yeah, great for taking the time. Thank you. I appreciate that as well. I had a great chat with you. And Outer Space, it's coming up 18th through the 23rd of November. It's a few weeks away. And all the info is just outerspaceproject.com. Our handles on Instagram is just at Outer Space Project. I'm easy to find online too. Just Greg Mike on Instagram, gregmike.com. ABV is just ABV Gallery and abvagency.com. So definitely, tap in with us, try to come out to some of our events. Hopefully I run into some of y'all one of these days on the streets, and we'll chop it up. But thank you again so much. It was fun.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Greg Mike for coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of his creative story with us and sharing the story of the Outer Space Project, returning to Atlanta November 18th through the 23rd. And for Greg Mike, I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.